currently working on IDC number 4, but you kind of see the themes. Obviously, I'm a Zionist. I love Israel. I don't speak Hebrew, and I'm not from Israel, so this lecture is actually going to be about Israel in American comics, specifically the superhero genre. And if you notice, this is actually an homage to Captain America number 1. And the reason I did this homage, I think you'll see the next slide, this is Captain America number 1. So whereas Captain America was the first person to take on World War II and the Nazis, even before America was involved in World War II, I'm paying homage to exactly the same situation that I see now, only with Iran. So you can see the similarities, but you can see that I've kind of updated it. In a way, I'm kind of taking the image and applying it to today's politics, especially in regards to Israel and Iran. And most people, that when they see this image, they immediately think that there's something negative connotations towards Palestinians in general or Arabs in general. But if you look very carefully at this image, you see the Iranian flag, you see the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. It's very specifically dressed. And the person, of course, that he's punching out is Ahmadinejad, who used to be the president of Iran, who had incredibly hateful things to say about Israel and fear of nuclear weapons and all that kind of stuff. So the relationship between him and Adolf Hitler is very clear and close. But when we talk about Jewish stuff in comics, a lot of people think that Jews created the comic book industry as like some kind of Jewish format. I know a lot of people have written about the crypto-Judaism in early comics. I kind of disagree with a lot of that stuff. So I just want to throw that out there, that comic books are commercial. They've always been about making money. It's the same reason why Irving Berlin is writing White Christmas in the 1930s and 40s. These were people who were from New York, so there was a lot of media, business going on, publicity in New York, animation studios, movies, and then later on television, Broadway also. And so you had people living in Brooklyn and in the Bronx, a lot of them poor, happened to be cartoonists, loved drawing. The cartoon format was pioneered in the newspaper strips, and that's where all the money was. What the characters I'm talking about are the Guardians, the Guardians of the Universe? The Guardians from Oa, the Green Lantern, little blue short guys, and they've got these big heads, little short bodies and red robes with the Green Lantern symbol, and they got this big head of this blue guy. He's kind of bald in the front, he's got his white hair coming out, and these are the wise elders of Oa that are behind Green Lantern. Well, Gil Kane, whose real name is Eli Katz, was a comic book artist, and he used to draw from photo references. Paul Newman was the photo reference for the Green Lantern of the 1950s. He based the characters off of David Ben-Gurion. As all this Israel stuff was coming to the surface, people were thinking about it, especially Jewish creators who may not have been religious, certainly embraced Zionism and certainly embraced the proud idea of having Israel. Another one, for example, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee created Sgt Fury as a 1940s throwback book. They created it in 1962 or 1963 to talk about the war. And suddenly they started to work in a lot of they were more inclusive, basically. They included some diversity. When they wanted to update, when James Bond became really popular in the mid-60s, they updated Sgt Fury and they say, hey, what is he doing nowadays? So they updated him from 1940s World War II stuff to 1960s James Bond spy stuff. Well, in between, somebody gave him an eye patch. That's the eye patch.
Yeah.
It's Moshe Dayan. And it's not necessarily because they were trying to do something subversive, something that you didn't see. It was because they were very proud of Israel, and they drew inspiration from people that were around, and news articles and topics and things like that. And it worked in the comics very subtly. Now, remember the 1950s book? Well, in the 1970s, there was a revival now owned by a multinational company. They're now starting to reach out. They're starting to expand to different diversity. That's why the new X-Men are all people from different places around the globe. You know, Storm's from Africa, Nightcrawler's from Germany, Colossus is from Russia. So it was in this time that they came out with an Israeli superhero. The problem was, first of all, the people writing the stuff weren't Jewish. But more so than that, they didn't know how to talk about Israel while walking on eggshells. That's really what they did. So they perpetuated this common misconception that there's some kind of moral equivalency between terrorism and Israel, a legal state, an operating state, the Zionist state. And so when you have this Sabra story, you see right on the cover, it's very empathetic and emotional. You have a Palestinian child, an innocent victim. You have the Hulk, you have her. Everything looks kind of aggressive, but kind of sympathetic. And it kind of washes out that way, that, oh, there's a moral equivalency, and why can't we all get along? And whenever she's used, she's kind of used direct opposition to something like that. And the theme is always moral equivalency. Terrorism is just as bad as the formation of the State of Israel. The State of Israel, yeah, it's great, but, terrorism, they have to do the things they have to do. This is Magneto from the 1980s, which is different than Magneto from the 1960s. Magneto from the 1960s, he's just a dictator. He's not Jewish, there's nothing Jewish about him. But in the 1980s, Chris Claremont, who was writing X-Men from issue like 95 or so, up to 300, or about 300, he spent time in Israel. He lived on a kibbutz. And so when he wrote X-Men, he said this would be a great origin story to make Magneto more human, more relatable, to make him less of a villain and more of a complicated character, which is what he was trying to write. And so he took that subtle, they were from the East Europe someplace, and he actually grounded it. He made Magneto, which previously had no origins, gave him an origin of being a Holocaust survivor. He pursued it then in Israel. He made stories about how Magneto was a doctor in Israel and how he became a Nazi hunter and he became working with the Mossad. There was a whole bunch of stories that talked about Magneto, this villain that all of a sudden had a much more sympathetic storyline. And eventually Magneto will reform due to a lot of these things, and around issue 200, Magneto then comes to terms with his involvement with the Holocaust and realizes what he's done as a villain is really that terrible, and he turns himself in for trial. And then it goes that way for a little bit. 1980s was great, because all of a sudden you had a lot of self-publishing, and anybody could make a book if they really put their mind to it. One of the people that made their book was Al Eisner, who's right here. So Al Eisner did Shalom Men. It first came out in 1988, although really he had been working on it since 1983. This is the first independently published American Jewish superhero that specifically talked about Israel, whose adventures took place in Israel, and it wasn't necessarily political. There were all kinds of villains, all kinds of themes. You had Jewish holidays in one issue, you had humor, you had parody, you had science fiction in space. It really ran the gamut of all the genres of comic books. And what he really did is he treated it like a regular Marvel or DC hero. And Al will get back to you, and we'll do some talking about Shalom Men. In Israel, and like I say, this is about American comics, but in Israel, there was some of this starting to pop up. And Uri Fink, as a child, I think, created Sabra Man. I think the first issue was on the right. And you can see how he kept on returning to it, and his artwork got much better. Now he's a professional cartoonist in Israel. He does different stuff. But you can see how the characters, other people were kind of starting to think about this in the 70s and the 80s. In the 90s, I believe this is 90s, and also again in Israel, Orion was created. It's so esoteric, nobody really caught on to it until it was published, and everybody in Indonesia knew what it was about, so it immediately blew up. Kitty Pryde, the Jewish X-Men. Who's so proud of her? She's named Kitty Pryde, and she wears like a Magen David necklace. What's on the left side of her? Jew. And the next side of her is 212, which is also another reference to that. Even though she's jewelry, it really says Jew. And he knows that that's what's going on. If you look to the left, you can really make out J-E-W, and it kind of gets a little more squiggly towards the end.
What's the 212 reference?
212 is a reference to a similar thing with the Quran 551. It was something that was going on in Indonesia at the time. And so everybody in Indonesia was like, oh, 212, we put it in the comic book.
That's New York City's area code.
Yeah, so if you're from New York, you go, oh, 212, But it was clear to the people he wanted to communicate to. And the reason he was doing this was for a lot of internal politics, too. There was a Christian person running for like a governorship, I think, and he was involved in this mess ideologically. Marvel responded and did fire him, and his contract was terminated. But the fact that this kind of stuff is still going on is the reason why you need this kind of advocacy for Israel. This is a little bit different. So you remember the original one was Captain America punching out Hitler. Now you have, and then I did my version, which was Magen punching out Ahmadinejad. Both hateful, terrible people that murdered hundreds of people. But I want to warn you, because as much as you may or may not like Trump, at the end of the day, making an equivalence, a moral equivalence between the President of the United States and Hitler is extreme. And it's extreme in a very slippery slope. And I'm warning people not to fall for the slippery slope. Ocasio-Cortez, a lot of communist ideas. A lot of people died under communism.
Yeah, but
Omar is somebody who is anti-Semitic. She's anti-Israel, and she's been called out on it. But here she's being depicted as the hero. So be very careful about where your parody and satire go, because it can lead to very dangerous places.
Yeah, Max Stein, who supported Omar, was one of her not supported, but he also called her out too.
Well, that's good, but what you really need is a lot of. You could never say anything, no matter what party you were from. Israel's the ally. Israel's our friend. Israel's the people that are keeping peace in the Middle East. They're the ones that are the freest nation, providing for safety of Arabs, safety of Arab holy sites, safety of the gay community. All kinds of things that are happening in Israel that are so pluralistic and so diverse happen nowhere else in the Middle East. So to have somebody advocate against it in the United States Senate or Congress is extremely outrageous. I want to show you these, and I have to wrap it up really soon. These are some of the influences in my personal work. Magen is influenced by the first patriotic superhero, The Shield, which is then later published by Archie Comics, created by Irv Novick, also Jewish. You see Will Eisner did the second patriotic superhero, a little bit more overt, Uncle Sam. You see he's spinning Hitler, and Hitler has that swastika stuff. And then the third one, Captain America again, except this is Captain America done by the co-creator of Captain America in 2002. And he returns back to the Captain America theme, except here, in 2002, during the very beginning of the war on terrorism, Captain America is punching out who? He's punching out Osama bin Laden. So even in his older age, he understood the power of this image and how it affects and how it attacks pop culture and how it can be used. Okay, so this is my work again. I'm going to kind of speed through this because if you guys want to buy a comic book, we have a booth upstairs, and I have some extras over here that you can purchase if you like. Israeli Defense Comics, I have 3 issues out. And I want to bring it to the third issue because the third issue ends up with a team-up between my character and Al Weisner's Shalom Men. And sorry to short you a little bit, but I want to introduce Al Weisner right now. He is a San Diego Comic-Con Inkpot Award winner for his work on Shalom Men. He's done 45 issues, self-done, self-published, self-made. So the art, the writing, advertising it, getting it out there, from 1988 through 2013, with a little asterisk that there's a new adventure in this one also, so 2018. And so I'm just going to do a little Q&A with you, and then we'll open it up if we have any time to